Popcorn world. Popcorn world.
Can I make you groove now? Yes, I can. So you can get this groove in a bag of a can. Put the big around the world and the holes in your hand. Popcorn world. 250 flavors gonna make you smile. 250 flavors gonna make you smile. 250 flavors gonna make you smile. I said popcorn make you smile. Ah. Popcorn world. Popcorn world. Popcorn world. It's a popcorn world. It's a popcorn world.
BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports contests and events with first-to-market odds and lines. What's up, y'all? It's your man, Lloyd Spence. And listen, all you got to do is find your reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf, all at betonline.ag. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports information, from live in-game betting, props, and futures. So, head to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join today and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BLEAV50, that's BLEAV50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. It's BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Tell them the Noisemakers sent you.
You're now listening to BLEAV in the ACC with Heisman Trophy winner and Florida State legend, Mr. Charlie Ward, Wave 3 TV, and Furniture Hall of Famer Kendrick Haskins, and Mr. Talking Noise himself, and of course Mama Noise's man, Lloyd Spence. And now, it's time for BLEAV in the ACC.
Good morning, everybody. We do our taping in the morning, so that's why we say good morning. And we're here, and we're live on Facebook and YouTube, so that's why we say good morning visually, because that's how you greet me.
As Charlie vegan shake.
As Charlie vegan shake. And I sip my, what I am now calling the Thursday cup. This is a very, Charlie, I don't know what has happened, but on Thursdays now, I've mastered the morning cup of coffee. I've fixed 2 Thursday cups in a row that have been fantastic, and I'm very happy and proud of myself.
This is what you did last week, Charlie. It's him talking about his cup of coffee.
It's delicious. It's amazing. I've patted myself on the back. You're supposed to encourage yourself. David encouraged himself
daily.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I'm curious to know, like, what makes a good cup of coffee.
Okay, great. Okay, Charlie. See, now you understand. Great question. Here's the key, I believe. Rather than putting the cream and sugar in after, you put it in before and allow the heat of the hot coffee to encompass the. Would you stop? I don't deserve.
And that was a humble flex.
It's not a humble flex. It's not a humble flex. It's saying I'm teaching you guys how to make a good cup of coffee.
I don't drink coffee.
Okay. You put the coffee in after you put the cream and sugar in, and it grabs it and mixes it better than it would if you put it in after the fact. Okay. You put it in before. And now, and I think I've mastered the technique, and that's why it's so good. And Kendrick can't appreciate it for whatever reason, but it's fine. Doesn't change me, Charlie. I'm still the same guy.
Good. I'm glad.
Right. Like I said, David had to encourage himself, so there you go.
Does anybody else drink coffee in the house?
My grandmother. My grandmother drinks, and I'm still in Arkansas for those who are listening. My grandmother does, but she won't let me make her coffee,
Uh,
which is which
well,
is,
It
which is
calls into
ironic.
question the validity of how good this coffee is.
It's listen. It only has to be good to me. I don't listen. I think she won't let me make it because she's a creature of routine. Like she's
right,
98, so when you're
right,
98, you can't have people mucking around with your system, right?
yeah,
You got it. Clearly got a system if you're 98, so you don't want people messing with that. So
correct.
I get that. I do get that. I'm not gonna mess with her or mess with her system. She's earned the right to have her own system. So shout out to grandma. We got a lot that we want to talk about. Some of the stuff we want to do is going to be very, very fun, equivalent to what we did last week. But unfortunately, some of the stuff that we have to talk about today is not fun at all. Dare I even say it's a little weird. It's a very weird and bizarre set of circumstances. And the good news about doing a podcast that currently is not connected to major networks or anything like that is that the autonomy and the ability to speak freely is here. We can kind of have a conversation that is very nuanced and dare I say maybe even a little uncomfortable, but yet it allows people to be able to see the layers of a very difficult situation. And so and then the other good thing about a conversation like this, I have two very highly intelligent and very balanced and measured brothers to have the conversation with in Kendrick Haskins and Charlie Ward. So obviously at this point, most of you probably have figured out that we're talking about, because this is an ACC show, we're talking about one of the most highly touted quarterbacks that has ever played in the ACC, Deshaun Watson, and a ruling that went down Monday that he would be suspended 6 games in the NFL. And it was a ruling that most people thought was
Like,
light, and everyone, including Deshaun Watson's camp, thought a little bit unfair, but everybody, or 2 out of the 3 entities thought, okay, we'll live with it. And 2 out of 3 being Deshaun Watson's camp and also the NFLPA. The NFL, however, who pushed for a year suspension and a strong, hefty fine, was not pleased and was given 3 days to appeal. And they said, we'll take the 3 days to decide and make a decision on the 3rd day. And much like our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, on the 3rd day, they rose again and said, no. We are appealing. And now we sit in the aftermath of that decision with some very interesting possibilities that could go forth with this decision. And so that's what we're going to, I guess, kind of tackle a little bit of today. So I want to start, I guess, at the beginning for you guys and get your initial reactions as to this, what you thought with the suspension, but then also we carry it forward and what you're feeling even now. And I guess we should start with our the only state championship winning coach that we have on this broadcast, which is the great Charlie Ward. So there you go. He's
Well,
like, oh my God, now you want to start with me.
no, I mean it's no big
he's the
deal.
one person who played quarterback in the ACC on this
And
show.
that is right.
Well, my initial thought was I didn't really have an initial thought as far as one way or the other, because the judge made the decision, and most times when you have an arbitrator that's been decided upon by 2 entities, the 2 entities that's involved, most times you kind of go with,
What's your
that's the not the final. I guess that's the final, but of course there's an appeal process and everything. So I didn't really have a whether it was too hard or not hard enough. None of, well, I just respected the process. However, of course, there's an appeal, just like all people, have an opportunity to be able to appeal their situation if they don't like it. And the NFL didn't like the sentence because they wanted something a little harsher. And I just think, that is their right. However, I mean, he missed the whole year last year, which to me should have been taken into account, even though it wasn't on the NFL's timeline. But I think that should take into account something. And I'm not sure if that went into the judge's thoughts or in process. But 6 games, whether you feel like it's enough, if you start looking at it from a holistic standpoint, as far as time missed, it's a year in 6 games. So he missed how many ever games they had last year, 17.
Right.
And now he's going to miss 6 more games. So that's a nice chunk of almost 2 years in some form of fashion. So I know there's 2 sides. There's victims here, which at one point I think they did mention that they felt like this was consensual. Deshaun Watson's camp at one point said it thought this. I mean, said that he actually engaged in it, and so it wasn't like they denied that piece after the initial. But it's something that is tricky because like I said, there are people who were victimized during this time, and no sentence will ever take that away. So. Yeah. Regardless of what the sentence is, it's not going to take away any of those feelings. And so I just think it's something that I think we all have to understand and learn from. But at some point, if he handles it right, he'll learn from it and keep moving.
But the arbitrator made it where he has to keep moving and learn from it because he can only get massages now through the team. He can't go out and get massages anymore. The devil's advocate in that, and like I'm not disagreeing with you for the sake of it, Charles. I'm just giving the other side of it. That he sat out last year, but that was more protecting his trade value than it was the case because he had already wanted to get out of Houston. Houston was trying to get rid of him. They didn't want him to get injured. So that was really, I mean, he could have played last year. He didn't. And so that's the other side of it as far as he already sat out a year. That's the argument on the other side. And
Hold up. So you said he could have, but he didn't.
Mm-hmm. But he wasn't suspended, though.
Right.
He didn't play because they was protecting his trade value.
Right.
I totally get that.
That's the thing. That's the argument.
So this year, he's going to be suspended for 6 games, right?
Right.
So to me, he is not going to be able to play. So last year, even though he could play, he didn't play. He was healthy. It wasn't like he was injured. He was healthy. Trade value or not. I'm just saying he missed 17 games, and he's going to get ready to miss 6 more, regardless if he can or can't play or suspended because somebody had told him that he can't play. He still did not play. So that's just my thought. Okay, go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah.
I'm just saying that's what the argument is.
I get it.
And honestly, I can see both sides of it. I can see what you're saying, but I can also see what the other side of that argument is. This situation is just one of those where I can couldn't be more on the fence. I don't have really like a solid opinion one way or the other.
Right.
But so I think more than anything, I'm just wondering what's it mean for the NFL going forward because in the like union contract or whatever, they kind of took because Roger Goodell was the judge, jury, and laid down
everything.
Yeah.
Right.
And so now they get an arbiter but like the NFL is appealing, but they're appealing to themselves. There's not like a separate entity. It's like, I mean, as dumb as it sounds, it's Roger Goodell appealing to Roger Goodell. And so that this is what they negotiated. So like, that's when we were talking off air. That's why I was coming from, is like, are we going to end up in a strike in the NFL because the NFLPA is, if they, you know, they negotiated to have an arbiter in there for punishment, and then if they go back on after the arbiter and still punish him, what does that mean? I mean, then what was the point of the arbiter in the first place? That's just an extra step to get to where Roger Goodell is does whatever he wants to do. Marcus.
Shout out to Marcus Rabin. I first of all, let me just start by saying I cannot hate a case more than I hate this one. This is just as bad of a set of circumstances as you can possibly have, and a cautionary tale for so many different things. I mean, where do you even begin?
Right.
My struggle is with all of the context of everything that is this case. You know, if I was a judge and I had to listen to this case, I would struggle tremendously with all of it. I don't understand why you need 66 massages. I don't understand. Is this a company that you're dealing with? Are these all individual calls? Who has time to make all these arrangements for massages? It's just so, there are so many nuanced, bizarre aspects of this case. And yes, he absolutely has a problem. I mean, and I need him to recognize that. I need you to recognize, sir, that it is not a normal thing to bring someone to your house and want extra things beyond the massage. That is not normal behavior, right? So please grab a hold of that. And I'm obviously deeply concerned that you don't get that. But I also am deeply concerned that it appears that there are people who are willing, because here's the uncomfortable side of this case. In order for Deshaun to arrive at the place where he thinks there are extra things that you can get in a massage, someone has to say, hey, you know, there are things that you can get beyond the massage.
He's gotten the extra things.
Right. There's precedence in this. So is it all that he is? I know we're vilifying him, and all of the women's groups want to come after him and say, hey, you know, he's a monster, he's this, that, and the other. There are also women who have made a choice, and we're not talking about that, because here's what he's done. Here's what he has done. He has 1,000%, every time he's been asked, maintained, I am innocent. I've committed no crime. And guess what? 2 grand juries have backed him up on that. Now, for why they backed him up on that, I don't know, because we all know that grand juries are not always. You can craft a case and the presentation of evidence in many ways. So we've seen that in the great state of Kentucky with certain cases. So
the grand juries threw him out because he had the better attorneys.
Right, exactly. So I, you know, that makes it weird. So there's just so many things that are wrong with all of this. So the part that baffles me is with all of the essence of what this is, because here you have Deshaun Watson paying people off, you have the Houston Texans paying people off, and now you're saying, well, we don't appreciate the ruling, we're going to go back and get a better ruling. Well, guess what? If you bring in another arbitrator, they can't just go by the stuff that they've heard. They've got to do what? They've got to hear the case again. And guess what they get to do? Bring in witnesses, bring in whoever, call in whatever. So why, if you're the NFL, do you want to keep dragging this out? Why do you? Because at the end of the line of this, it doesn't feel like there's going to be anything good to happen. Like, Because if I'm Deshaun Watson, I'm gonna Nino Brown this thing at some point and say, hey, there are other people involved in this beyond me. Because you can't do something like this in a bubble. He's not on a phone or text message by himself saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" There's people.
Some of them he has though. I mean, at the crux of it, yeah, that is how it was working.
Well, some of it, but not all of it, because they remember they said early on that the Texans, I guess they got wind of what he was doing, and they put like hey man, you need one of these NDAs, and they put an NDA in his locker for him to use, for this massage. So it's just there's a lot of weird stuff going on here, and
super complicit,
right. And so then you go back to Charlie's point, and you say, well, man, the dude has already said a year, whether he, for whatever reason, whether it was trade value or whatever, he sat down for a year, self-imposed, okay, whatever. He set for a year. Now he's going to sit more. So that's 23 games that he's not going to play. Now he didn't lose money, and maybe that's the problem, right?
Part of it. I think what makes it look bad more than anything is A, the Texans role in it, and then B, Cleveland offering him that contract that basically protects him from protects him financially from anything the NFL does. So like even if he does miss a year, if they are successful in getting him out for this season too,
right? Financially, it's not going to hurt him at all.
It's not hurting him at all,
right?
But I think that's the bigger issue, and I think that's what Roger Goodell is looking at. I think that's what Joe Public is kind of looking at too, because everybody knows the terms of that contract, and it's like basically if you suspend him 6 games, it means he's basically getting off scot-free financially.
So then if this is just about a fine, then okay, then come back with a ruling, because Roger Goodell could just say no, he's got to pay something, and just hit him with the proper fine, and then let's I don't know, it just seems like this is just there's no way to win any of this on any side. It's bad. Because by the way, here's the other part that no one's talking about. If you think for 1 second that Deshaun Watson's life is ever going to be normal again, you don't understand how public opinion works.
Well, let's just take that for instance, that what you just mentioned. There are some things that it depends on who it is, the act, because if you take Ray Lewis and what happened at the Super Bowl,
right,
that whole deal, and now if you see Ray Lewis today and after that whole incident and what happened, I mean he's not. I mean it's on his record. I mean it's there. I just brought it up,
right?
But it didn't deter him from doing all the things that he wanted to do later on in his career. He kind of redirected his career after that whole incident and cleaned up his friends, started moving in a different direction, getting different people around him. And so it helped clean up his image. Ray Rice, that's going to be with him forever. He wasn't able to resurrect his career again. Right. And so, like I said, it really depends on, the situation and how it all works. And so he has a chance to do all that, to make sure that he's doing what he's supposed to do and getting the necessary help that he needs to get. And so I just think sometimes we need an experience to be able to humble us, because that's one of the things I always talk about when I go out and talk. You can't feel like you're ever bigger than, because when you start feeling like you're bigger than, you'll start doing these types of things and people will start catering to you. And then you think that that's the way it's supposed to be all the time. It's always great to remain humble and stay in the moment and understand and know that regardless if you're making so much or you're getting so many accolades or whatever the case may be, you have to remain to a point where you can't get above the law in a
I want
sense.
to stay there for a second because this is an angle that I haven't heard enough people. A little bit of conversation, but not enough. And I think you're the perfect person to have this with, you and Kendrick. Is his inability to show public contrition, maybe he's doing it privately, I don't know, but his inability to show true public contrition, is that also driving the idea of what the NFL is trying to do? Because let's go down that lane for a minute, Charlie. What if he would have come out and said, okay, I want to be very clear to people, I have not committed a crime. However, I do recognize that my behavior is wildly inappropriate, and I'm going to do the following things to change. Like if he laid out a couple of things and said, I'm going to give to some women's group, I've educated myself on some things, I'm going to give some money, but whatever, however you want to do it. Had he done that, do you think we'd be at this place? If there was true visual, tangible contrition, do you think we would be at this place?
Yes.
Okay.
Because people would see that as, he's doing it only because of his image, trying to create something for his image, and what have you. And so I think he went through his lawyer to mention that all this was consensual in some form of fashion. And I don't know what he's doing behind closed doors. He hadn't really talked much to the public or the press about this because of, I guess, everything that's going on.
Right.
But I just hope that it's something that will help him to understand that he's not bigger than. And, we've had owners go to these types of masseuses. So we know that they're out there. It's just a matter of trying to find those situations. And so I just think that at some point he will have to make that type of statement. He don't have to give to the women's groups. I think that's, a public, publicity, something he probably could do. But just the contrition piece plays a big part, and just his image, I do believe, when it's all said and done.
Yeah, he has to show some form of contrition, like you said, Lloyd. He doesn't have to come out and admit to anything, but he can come out and say, I understand that maybe my behavior made some uncomfortable. Say something to that, to that extent. But yeah, because like the Browns in their statement was like, oh, he's shown contrition. No, he hasn't.
No,
he hasn't. One bit of contrition.
Right.
At any point. So he's got to show some kind of contrition. But like you said, it's still going to be there. Because like, look at Michael Vick. It's still people who bring up the dog thing every time. They won't forgive him, and he's done more for PETA or whatever for looking out for dogs or whatever, the ASPCA, than anybody has. He's done way more than most of the people who out here still condemning him for that.
Right.
He's now,
right.
And it's going to be the same thing with Deshaun. He could give all the money in the world he wants to women's rights groups and all that stuff. There's still going to be a huge sect of people who's never going to let him live that down. And we know part of the reason why that is. But but those acts really don't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. But if he has to be contrite, he's got to have to live with it. But if he can show some kind of contrition, and then you know how this world is. He goes out there and starts winning. A lot of this stuff won't be brought up anymore. Like Ray Lewis' situation, he won a couple Super Bowls. You don't really hear about it anymore. Tyreek Hill, he's won a Super Bowl, and he's the highest paid wide receiver in the league. He had his thing, and so.
Oh, that's right. He did have a thing, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
I forgot about Tyreek had a thing. You're right. I forgot he had it at all. You're right.
Right. It doesn't come up at all. And so, like, you look at Ray Rice. We don't be totally honest. Ray Rice didn't play anymore in the league, not because of that situation. It was because he's on the downside of his career. If Ray Rice
that it was a video.
1,200-yard season, Ray Rice would have been playing again. So,
well, that and there was a video. Now, let me tell you, if there was a video of Deshaun Watson doing all this, we would not be having this conversation.
No, he'd be.
This would be over already.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can't be caught on video doing any of this.
Right.
Again, this is so. And then the other side that is so makes it so bad is that you know, Charlie and I have daughters, so we obviously would never want our children. Now, we don't believe our children would ever put out themselves in this situation, you know, preferably, you know, right? But at the same time, right, at the same time, no man wants to see his daughter in, you know, going through something like this or whatever. And
100%.
so, and if something like this were to happen, we want this guy prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, there's nothing positive or good or, now I'll say this too, because I think one of the reasons, I thought about this yesterday, I think one of the reasons why the NFL is pushing so hard for this and why they are going against their own arbitrator, because you mentioned that earlier, Charlie, and I thought you spoke about it very well, very eloquently. I think one of the reasons why they're doing it is because of the thing that we talk about a lot, and you know this well, Charlie, you're married to a lawyer. There's precedence. And once precedence has been set, then it helps you with the next thing that happens. And so if you keep this precedence at 6 games, it makes it difficult going forward to hammer down on the next guy. So now,
especially what the arbiter said is that the precedence has already been set.
It's already been set, right?
And so you can't do any more than that because you've already set that precedence.
Which is why I think they're going to at least try to increase the games and the amount of time so that if this were to ever unfold again, the new precedent is set, and they can say, we got Deshaun for 10 or we got Deshaun for a year. So minimum, the next guy has to do a year, right? Mm-hmm. So I get that part of it, or minimum, the guy has to pay a $10 million fine or a $5 million fine or whatever the new precedent is. So I get that part of it and the desire to do that. The only thing that I wanted to say to that, and we kind of got into a little thing last night on the 5, is that is the NFLPA going to stand for that? Like, are they going to say, wait a minute, man, every time you guys botch this thing up, we are the ones who pay the price. And oh, by the way, all things are not equal. You're letting owners get off the hook for tampering, and you're letting owners, like Charlie Ward said, letting owners get off the hook for a similar thing, but yet the players are being hammered down on. So if you think this is not going to come up in the next CBA negotiation, you don't understand how the world works.
I think there's probably a few of these owners who want the NFL just to leave this alone.
Oh, for sure.
So if this drags out and gets into the courts, all of that, if they get into
because all of that comes out,
all of that's coming out.
Right.
Dan Snyder and Robert Kraft, and Jerry Jones, all of them got stuff on them, and so they don't want all that coming out. So I do wonder how much the NFL is going to push it because of that that angle of it.
So there are so many layers. Like I said, there's so many layers to this thing, and it's not good. It is not good at all. Mm-hmm. I just don't know. I don't know. If your best guess, Charlie, where do you think this is going? Where do you think this is going to end up?
I really don't know. I mean, I understand they need to appeal just because they felt like it was not harsh enough. And so I do believe that they did that for that reason. I just don't know what they're going to try to get it to. I know they had their sights set on a certain number and, a fine potentially. So maybe that's where they're trying to get to, or at least get close to. And it's a double-edged sword, because it's something that you guys are, the person you agreed upon to make the judgment, and now you're coming back and saying that's not good enough. So, I mean, it's a tough situation for the NFL because it wasn't what they would do, and again, they're the NFL. they feel like they're bigger than, and if I don't like your assessment, then I'm gonna just bogart the whole situation,
Right.
and make it to where we get kind of what we want in a lot of ways, and so that is the tough situation that you find yourself in. And I understand the NFL, perspective as well, because they wanted a different outcome,
Mm-hmm.
and so they put this appeals process in just so they could have say so, in the end. And like you're saying, the appeals. Who's doing the appeal? Who they're appealing to? Are they appealing to the judge that made their decision?
They appealing to themselves.
Yeah, I mean,
Essentially, I think he's about to get that year. He's about to get that year suspension, and then what the PA does, NFL PA does from there, I don't know. As I think, this could get really ugly because I feel like if the NFL PA has a legitimate gripe. I mean, like, we agreed upon this. Why are we going against what we already agreed upon in the last CBA? So.
And by the way, you brought Sue Robinson in to do this. Right. So then you cut her legs out from under on the very first time she ever. I mean,
and that doesn't make why you get what you want is because you've botched it so many times in the past.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. I don't know. I hate this thing. This is one of those cases that we've sat and watched, and there's nothing good about it. There's none of these things are ever good. But I'm saying you try to find some light, and there's no light.
There's no positive outcome for this.
No. There's not even a path for it. I don't even see a path for it.
Right.
Because even once it's resolved, we still don't really know what it is. We still don't even know what this is. It's so bad on so many levels. And here's the reality that no one likes to talk about, but it's true. In all 24 of those cases, there were only 2 people in that room, and they know the truth.
Right.
Now, that may never see the light of day. The truth may never see the light of day. But those 2 people or those people know the truth. And it is damaging to our society that we won't ever understand what is happening so that it doesn't continue to happen in other situations.
All right.
Yeah. So, whew, gosh. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Well, we do know that what is done in darkness will eventually come to light.
Yeah.
And so that is something that we all should learn from at some point. That, even if you feel like you're getting away with something, at some point that behavior is going to come back and show up in the light, because that's just part of God's nature.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've hammered that about as much as we could. To be continued, to say the least. We'll I guess depending on how all this unfolds, we'll revisit it at some point. But nevertheless, we will press on to the next thing, which we were trying to have something a little more positive in these dog days of summer. And I'm glad we got Charlie Ward here today because last week
he's an authority.
He's authority, yes. Last week we did a very fun thing about talking about the all ACC offenses, and your name came up, Charlie. We put you up as the greatest quarterback of the 80s and 90s because we just felt like that's what we feel. So there you go.
I appreciate it. Put me up there.
Wasn't even here.
And you weren't even here, right? Now, admittedly, we're probably biased, but that's okay. But we also wanted to go to the other side of the ball and talk about like all defensive stuff. And so who better to talk to about this than Mr. Charlie Ward? So we're going to lean heavily on his expertise. And at first I was going to separate these, but I think I'm going to put these all in the same category here. So we'll just allow Charlie to kind of pontificate and wax poetic in his era, 80s and 90s. Who is the best defensive line that you think you faced, that you saw in the ACC? I know you guys, there was some blend over or whatever, but who would you say was the best defensive line or linemen that you remember seeing?
Well, during my time, we had some pretty good defensive lines. And not a lot of them went to the NFL. That was the kicker. We had a few, but not a lot of them went to the NFL. But they were just good together.
Yeah.
They played well together. They played with great passion. Played their techniques well. And our defense was solid. I know my 2 years they saved us. They played well for both of my years that I played. And so they were very good. Of course, Miami, they weren't in the ACC at the time.
Right.
They count.
They count?
Yeah, according to what we decided, we said historically, and we said if we're looking historically and we have to, and the history of a team now, of all the teams that are now currently in the ACC, then Miami counts.
You can't go wrong with them. They had some really solid defensive lines. I didn't get a chance to play against a couple of those defensive lines, but I actually watched them when I was in college. They were like my freshman, sophomore years. Even before I got there. You're talking about Jerome Brown.
Yeah.
I was on that. We had Corey, not Corey, but not Marvin Sapp.
Warren.
Warren Sapp.
Yeah.
He
he was the Rock. The Rock wasn't the Rock. He had too much hair. But Kirkpatrick. They had some really solid defensive linemen come through in those 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
During that time, so you can make an argument for, I don't know, there's a group of them. I can't remember the years, but there was a group of Miami defensive linemen.
I gave some love 80s wise, as far as arguably the best to Refrigerator Perry, like coming out of Clemson. You kind of would. I can't remember. I was trying to remember. I'm like, who was the best in the 80s? And I couldn't remember anybody. Maybe was Michael Perry?
Michael Dean Perry. Yeah, I was gonna say both.
Michael Dean.
Yeah, he was 80s as well, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
He was older than Frizz, right?
He was older. Yeah. So I said the Perry brothers were probably in the 80s, the creme de la creme. Probably. You can make a case for some others too, but I would say those were probably, and Refrigerator was probably the more, I guess, dominant and definitely the more athletic, because he played in some form or fashion both sides of the ball. if you want to look at the 85 Bears, he played both sides of the ball. But I would say he was probably 80s wide. But like you said, in the 90s, man, I don't know if you can go beyond Sapp. Like, Jesus, he was such a man child. But you guys had some great players as well, though.
Yeah, like I said, we were collectively pretty good. We didn't have like one standout at that point. Besides, if you want to go there, Higgins, who was there with me, my senior. We had Dan Footman. You don't know much about Dan Footman. So again?
So your linebackers were really the strength of your all's defense, wasn't they?
They were good. The front seven were good, just together. Yes, we had guys and our linebacker core that went on to do great things. They did great things in the pros. But we had a good front seven, just in general. And so, like I said, they saved me quite a few times. My junior and senior year.
Would you say you mentioned linebackers and I was thinking edge rushers. Who would you say your 80s and 90s edge rushers and linebackers are? It should say DN and linebackers, but it didn't. So yeah.
I don't know. I need a list, but to see. I don't know.
Or just ACC guys. Like we were thinking, like Pat Swilling. We were thinking Levon Kirkland. Levon was when? Was Levon 80s, 90s, or was he late? Was he more 90s than 80s?
I think he was 80s and 90s.
Okay. Now Marvin was 2000s, right? Marvin Jones.
Yeah, Marvin. He's a linebacker, but he was 90s.
He was 90s. Okay.
Yeah, he was along with me.
Okay. And Peter was in your group, right?
Peter Bower.
Yeah,
Bernard
Derek
Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Peter
Derek
Bower,
was
Bernard Wilson,
right?
Andre Wadsworth, Derek who?
Oh yeah, I forgot about Andre
Wadsworth. Wow, yeah, there's a blast from the past.
Bernard Wilson. All those guys were they were freshmen my senior year.
Gotcha.
So they were good.
Did you face EJ Henderson at all?
He played
Maryland.
Yes. But
Maryland. What was that experience like?
Maryland they weren't good during our time. So
you didn't worry about EJ? Is that your way of humbly saying you were never concerned about EJ?
How much they dominated the ACC and they went into the ACC.
I was not concerned about you.
Maryland was a stat game.
Oh! Well, I think we know where this is going. My goodness!
And that was a Charlie Ward humble flex.
I don't even know how that was.
I was going to say, by the way, I'm not sure how humble it was. It was pretty.
But it's true.
I didn't say it wasn't true, Charlie. I'm just saying. It was pretty strong thing there, sir.
I don't know about Charlie innocent say, but it's true.
Bro, I don't have to play them again, so the game's already happened.
Right.
So that's what it was.
So it's not bulletin board material anymore.
Right. They got to live with that, not you. You got right.
I was trying to come back from injury just so I could play against Maryland. They wouldn't let me come back from injury. So Danny Canal goes out and throws 543 yards. I'm just saying.
I did not see that coming.
I'm glad it came.
Wow, I did not see that coming at all.
That's why
wow. Okay. So I dare not ask you about Anthony Simons. Did you play against Anthony Simons? Because I fear the same comment will be. Please see the previous comments kind of thing.
Is he from?
Was he from your group, Anthony Simons, or was he a little later?
I'm not sure. Was he from Clemson?
Yes, he was from Clemson. Yes.
Clemson had some tough defensive defensive ends during my junior year. I'm sure they had good players.
Yeah.
My senior year, but the game wasn't close.
Right.
My senior year, so they really didn't factor in too much. But their junior year, they had a good group. they get after us.
Yeah.
McClendon, the big defensive tackle.
Oh, yeah.
Big
Okay.
defensive tackle. I think it was McClendon. He was a force to reckon with. And I think Simmons, yes, Simmons was one of the defensive ends
Right.
that they had, or linebackers.
I think he was a linebacker on paper, but I think they played him up a lot. Because you got to remember also the name that what most people would say is the best ever to play linebacker in an ACC conference was probably Lawrence Taylor. Which, by the way, show you how God loves you. I mean, you avoided all of that. You didn't have to see him at all. Yeah. Amen. Right.
You're heavily favored.
Yeah, right. That's when you know. That's when you know you're highly favored, right there. When you avoid all of that whole thing. But yeah, I would say arguably that he and some people from a college perspective, you know, you say Lawrence Taylor, or you say maybe Chris Slade. Chris Slade was pretty amazing as well.
Yeah, he was a beast.
Yeah,
Chris Slade was a beast.
Yeah,
he was definitely hard to block. Or get a chance to play against him.
We asked the question last week, Charlie, and you can help us with this maybe. Because Chris Slade to me is indicative of a lot of guys who have these phenomenal, I mean, transcendent college careers, but then it doesn't translate up. And the question I always had was why? Like when a guy is so dominant in college, why doesn't it translate to the next level? Is it just because of? I mean, what is the? I guess I don't have a reason, but what? Why do you think it doesn't translate up?
I have no clue outside of either they stop working to get better, or their injuries, or system.
You
know, so it could be numerous things that may hinder someone's progress.
Yeah, getting to a better station.
Yeah, if you're not getting
coached you're not going to a good team, right? You're never going to a good team if you're a great player.
But
yeah,
I mean, so it's one of those deals where, you know, it's you never know why.
Yeah,
the why behind it.
That's interesting.
It's
That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot of factors, I would say.
So we'll keep going here. When you get into the 2000s and 2010, well, before I get to that, I got to ask you, who would you say is the best defense overall, 80s and 90s? Who? What is it? Is it? Well, I won't parse it. Who would you say, Charlie Ward, is the best defense from the 80s and 90s?
Well, of course, I'm gonna go with Florida State because
you knew where that was going.
We won a national championship within that time frame, and our defense was our strength.
It was the calling card, right?
You know, when it was all said and done. But there were some pretty good defenses, you know, in the 80s and 90s. As I mentioned, Miami, you know, they had very similar defenses. A lot of pros in the late 80s, early 90s. So it was, I mean, you can go quite a few places to find, you know, great defenses. But of course, I'm gonna go with our defense, who helped us win a national championship.
I like the subtle smirk there, Charlie. That's I'm here for it. I'm here for the flex.
I'm here for it every time.
I'm here for it. So we'll stay there, and then no, we'll go for it. I don't want to break up the plan we had. Okay, so when we get into the 2000s, 2010s, it's hard to argue against Miami's run. they kind of took over in many ways the ACC. Like it was man, that little run they had was. And by the way, I during this summer vacation, if you want to call it that, I got a chance to go back and watch the U. Y'all remember the documentary, the U?
Yeah.
And I had forgotten that basically the NCAA gutted Miami's team in the mid '90s with now Miami admittedly did some things they had no business doing, right? So we understand, but when they had to basically regroup and restructure and rebuild the culture of that team, and when they came back, in the late '90s, God, it was. You could argue that they were better. Like they were,
yeah,
they got better, and that was so weird that they were able to do that.
You said 2000s to 2010.
Yeah, I would say the 2000s and the 2010s. You could argue that two teams maybe dominated those 2 decades: Miami in the 2000s, and then obviously Clemson. Yeah, Clemson in the 2010s. I would say had the best defensive lines, although the Clemson teams don't individually stand out as well as the Miami teams do, right?
Right. But that Clemson team is dominant. I think it's also you looking at a different time.
Right.
Because it was, I don't want to necessarily say easier, but if you were dominant then a little bit, before social media and all that stuff, it just meant more.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, plus you look at those Miami teams, and they got Hall of Famers. The Clemson guys are still, yet to. A lot of them still playing, so this yet to be determined. But I mean, those Miami teams from back then. I mean, you got Ed Reed, Ray Lewis.
It was a lot of star power in those teams, man. But again, we go back to what we said earlier. The ACC is a unique place in that it has produced some great individual players, but not necessarily great team defenses as a whole. Like you got Julius Peppers, you got Daquan Bowers, you got Chris Long. I mean, you got guys that were really good. Gotcha. But it just didn't translate. Some of those guys translated up, some of those guys didn't, but it's just a very different set of circumstances. Coach Junior, I know you got to run. Do you have any shout outs before you walk out the door?
There's a shout out that I needed to make, but I'm not remembering.
And then the smile afterwards.
So you owe us a shout out, or you owe whoever that was a shout out, sir.
Whoever it was, shout out to you.
Shout out to you, whoever you are, but you'll get your official shout out next week. All right, Coach, we appreciate you.
All right. Appreciate you guys.
All right.
See you.
Hilarious.
And he delivers on accident.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's accidentally brilliant every single time. But yeah, going back to what we were saying, there's some really strong players. There's just not enough team stuff that makes you go like. People forget Aaron Donald is technically an ACC, right?
Yeah.
So the ACC can boast, and it arguably has the greatest.
ACC, or had they not gone over yet?
No, they were gone. They were in the ACC by that time. I think 2010 to 2013 or something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were there technically. People don't, we don't remember because the Pitt team wasn't very good.
They weren't any good,
right? But he was a man child, like, and he still is, right? So, how about the ACC boasts arguably the greatest 2 or 3 defensive players of all time, and you don't remember their college, you barely remember their college careers at all. So
Right.
it's very strange. It has a very strange
college career.
What do you say?
Except for Deion, you remember Deion's college career.
Right? How do we forget Deion? Deion. So let's stay there for a second, because if you were to say who is the greatest defensive individual player of all time, who would you give that to? Is that Lawrence? Is that Aaron? Is that Deion? Is that Julius?
If we're just going ACC or overall.
I would say ACC.
Only reason why I can't put Deion on there is because you could just not throw to him. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, it's dumb as it sounds dumb to say, but you can game plan around Deion.
You can.
Lawrence Taylor, you couldn't game plan that.
No. No.
Ray Lewis, you can't really game.
No. No.
So just by my personal standard, and you know me, I've got Deion Sanders jersey on my wall now. So
Right.
Deion Sanders fans you get. But if you're saying greatest defensive players of all time, to me, it just automatically has to be a front 7 guy.
Yeah.
Because the other guy, secondary guys, you can game plan around. You can just not throw the ball, except for Palomalu, because you never knew what he was gonna do.
Troy was a wild man too. Yeah,
I just feel like secondary guys you can kind of game around, whereas your front 7 guys, especially your linebackers, game plan around that because you can move them all over the place.
Yeah. It's hard to argue against that logic of what you're saying, because Ed Reed was incredible. Deion was incredible. The Roll brothers were incredible. You can go through all of that, but man, there's no answer. There was no answer. Listen, North Carolina wasn't good, but you knew Lawrence Taylor was going to be there all day.
Right.
And you knew that the game plan was to stop Lawrence Taylor. And by the way, you couldn't do it, but you were hoping you could at least slow him down at some point. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis is the first linebacker I ever saw run sideline to sideline and beat a running back to the sideline. And the running back had the edge. I'd never seen that before.
Right.
Because it's funny. I hadn't watched. I'm going forward now. To the 2000 Super Bowl, of which my New York Giants played in. And I remember it vividly that I think it was Tiki that was running. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, Tiki ran, it was like a counter back left, and Ray was on the opposite side. Mm-hmm. And Tiki ran the ball on a sweep. And by the time he got to the sweep, Ray Lewis was waiting for him on the sideline. And I said, oh, my God. I hadn't seen many Ravens games to that point. And I was going, that's the freakiest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, how do you do that? So
the only thing I can compare to that is from the 80s, and it's Ronnie Lott. Remember, they were playing the Rams.
Yeah.
And Ronnie Lott came from the right hash.
Yes.
To the left sideline, didn't get the interception, but he knocked the ball.
But he knocked the ball right.
He ran so far to get to that ball. I mean, there's something I'll never forget. I mean, it's like it wasn't even that big of a game. I think it was like in the third quarter or something like that.
But, right, and I don't think people
across the field with the ball.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how insane and difficult that is. That's not normal. You can't. There are maybe a handful of guys, maybe not even a handful. Like maybe there's still space in your hand for the guys that have the ability to do that. So it's very strange. But yeah, even today, it's weird to say, but I think, Lawrence Taylor might be he and Ray Lewis may be the standard.
I think it's Lawrence.
Yeah.
I mean, Ray's up there, but I mean, I think it's Lawrence.
I think you give Lawrence the edge because he's the blueprint for Ray.
Right.
Yeah, he's the blueprint for Ray. So, Interesting. This was a good day of discussion, although, like I said, every time I have to discuss this Deshaun Watson stuff, it is wildly uncomfortable. Because you don't know what to do with it.
One more thing about Lawrence Taylor. He did all that and was high on everything.
Oh, yeah. Let's
overdoing this stuff.
Let's be very clear about Lawrence Taylor. Thank God there was no social media. Because history would be telling a very different. Right now, we only have the lure of Lawrence, or the lore of Lawrence Taylor. We don't have the actual footage or shots of tweets of him coming out of hotel rooms and everything else. So otherwise, we'd have a very different perspective on who Lawrence. I'm not sure he would have even graduated or made it out of college unscathed.
Right? Oh no.
Yeah. So, yeah, Lawrence Taylor is history has been very kind to him, to say the least.
He's a legend.
He's a legend. On and off the field. All right. So, Kendrick, do you have any shout outs that you like to give?
Actually, a few shout outs.
Let's go, brother.
Shout out for one to former U of L basketball player Damian Lee. Of course, he's won his NBA title with the Warriors this year. He's his celebrity golf scramble here in town on Monday.
Okay.
I know him. I know Peyton Siva. I know Kenny Payne. Those are the ones I know for sure. And he told me Dale Curry is going to play in. So,
interesting. Well, it's a lot easier to get Dale Curry when you're married to his daughter.
Right. Dale's playing. I mean, who knows who might be there from the Curry family. He didn't allude to anything, but he definitely said Dale would be there. So
okay.
Shout out to Jack Harlow on Wednesday of next week. He's putting on a celebrity kickball tournament.
AKA your bestie.
Here in Louisville. And as of now, and I'm sure you're gonna hit me with a humble flex, but look at you already grabbing the button.
Already ready, buddy.
I'm going to be the umpire in the game.
There it is.
And that was a humble flex.
Smells like victory.
Probably always says, but it's true.
It's true. There you go. That's funny.
Shout out to the University of Kentucky basketball team who put on an open practice to raise money for flood victims in Eastern Kentucky. As of last report, they've raised over $3 million for those people. So shout out to them. Shout out to the University of Louisville. They put on a telethon yesterday. Wasn't on my station, but hey, they did it. But shout out to them. I don't know the figure that they raised, but shout out to them, and shout out to everybody who's helping out with the cause for those families in Eastern Kentucky who are suffering from all the flooding that happened last week.
Yeah, we send all of our thoughts and prayers with Eastern Kentucky right now. Unbelievable set of circumstances, and we're just praying for peace and praying for healing and praying for restoration in that area. It's gonna take a while to climb out of this. And this is back-to-back years for Eastern Kentucky that, something where nature and acts of God have taken over and caused some challenges. But hopefully there is a rainbow at the end of it all of hope that will bring some clarity and healing to the area. And with that same thought process of hope, we definitely want to send hope today to Brittany Griner, who will probably find out her fate today. It's pick'em, quite honestly. It's pick'em. Who knows what's going to take place with this situation. Hopefully, we'll get the results that we all have been praying and hoping for. But who knows, right?
Shout out real quick too, because as I look at my screen at First Take, proud big brother, as I look up and see my girl Katie George is one of the take today. So shout out to her. We're gonna get her on the show eventually. Catching up to Katie's.
Katie's very busy. Yeah. She's very busy.
But that's my girl. I mean, I've known Katie since she was in high school, when she was a high school star volleyball player at Assumption. and followed her through U of L, followed her through her TV careers. When she started at the competition here, WDRB, but she was like my little sister. She was just following me around. Whatever I was doing, that's what she was doing. And so and she's parlayed that. She's on ESPN now. She's doing a fantastic job. She just got married earlier this year. So shout out to Kate.
Awesome. Shout out to you guys. I mean, you guys are killing the game and doing amazing things and winning. You're competing in golf scrambles and all kinds of wonderful things. It's beautiful.
I don't think you call what I was doing in the golf scramble competing.
Oh, listen, you swung a club. Let's just leave. We'll take that.
Shout out for giving us a lot of swag without logos on them, so I can actually wear the stuff around town.
That's nice. It's nice when you can get it. It's very nice when you can get it. Yeah. I don't think I have any other shout outs other than continually shouting out my beautiful 98-year-old grandmother who I have adored and just enjoyed being around. This has been one of the most relaxing and best vacations I've ever had and much needed. So I appreciate being able to have had this time with her. And I know it's coming to an end here soon. I got maybe another week or so, and then I got to get back to. Well, although I haven't stopped working, but it's been like a beautiful work vacation. What is that? What is that hideous thing you just put on the screen? What is that?
I think you know it.
Oh, I know what it is. The receiver cup.
It's the place where you pay taxes.
It's the receiver cup. It's the only thing that can catch anything in Dallas. Don't play with me, Kendrick Haskins. You know what it is.
This offense is gonna be awful. And I love Dak. I mean, you can't just trot CD Lamb out there and be like, yeah, this is our passing game.
It can get ugly.
They lost Cedric Wilson. I was hurt. I didn't see that coming. Losing him was a big blow. And Michael Gallup will be back, but when? I mean, he's coming off an ACL, so who knows when he's
coming back. When he comes back, he won't be Michael
Gallup until next year. And so,
right. It's gonna be a lot. Full disclosure, and I know this is an ACC show, but we are very well versed in all sports. It's gonna be a long season in the NFC East. If you thought it was bad the last couple of years, hold our beer this year. I promise. It's gonna be a long. I've been watching Giants training camp, and there are some wonderful things happening. The culture.
I had on ESPN earlier. Somebody had them on as a sleeper.
They could be.
Opinion doesn't really count.
Who's that?
Chris Canty.
Well, he's biased. He's very biased. He's very biased. So I get it. I completely get it. But it's going to be a long year in the NFC East, I think.
Yeah.
It's going to be a long year in the NFC East. All right. With that, we're going to get out of here. We're probably going to talk more about this when we get off the air, but you won't need to answer here. But thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for going back and listening to it.
Maven, I'm gonna be on your show whenever you call me.
Yeah, Marcus Maven. Appreciate you. Appreciate you, brother. Yeah. We'll be back next week, do it all over again. That's Kendrick Haskins. That was Charlie Ward that jumped off the screen. I'm Lloyd Spence. We'll see you next time. You've been listening to Believe in the ACC with Charlie Ward, Lloyd Spence, and Kendrick Haskins. Please like, follow, subscribe, and share from the Noisemakers page on Facebook and on YouTube. And you can also listen to us on Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be heard. And join us next time on Believe